Books presents The Island by Gary Paulsen, narrated by Jeff Woodman, followed by an afterword with the author.
Hello, I'm Gary Paulsen. The story you're about to hear is about a boy named Will Newton who goes to live by himself on an island in northern Wisconsin. I'll be back at the end of the program to talk some more about the book.
The island lay in almost the exact center of a small lake in northern Wisconsin, 7 miles north of the town of Maypine, 15 miles east of the town of Pinewood, both named after the pine forests that had once been prominent and were now logged off, and was thought so unimportant that it appeared on no topographical maps of the area. Indians had named the lake after its principal fish, a rough bottom feeder called the sucker. When white men came to put their name on it, they followed suit and called it Sucker Lake. And for that reason, the lake had been spared the building and crowding that came to many lakes in the northern fishing regions. Fishermen bent on spending their vacations and money trying for lake trout or bass or muskies were decidedly shy about taking time to fish a lake named after a soft flesh fish many considered fit only for fertilizer or pet food. And then, too, suckers were normally associated with muddy lakes and dirty water, neither of which brought tourists. For that reason, no resorts were built on the lake or anywhere nearby, and since the land around was rocky and had poor topsoil, no farmers settled there, and the lake was left alone, to exist much as it had since an Ice Age glacier had scooped it out and filled it. Somehow the glacier, in its slow grind across the north, had missed a U-shaped spot in the middle of the lake and left a rise of land that became a rocky island. The left arm of the island was a sandy dirt beach from which the main body ran south, curved east, and then back again to the north, making a small north-facing bay about 100 yards across. Wild rice stalks lined the bay, and some tree snags rose out of the water, old hardwoods that had died and not yet rotted. There were fewer than 4 inches of topsoil on the island, and no large trees could grow, only a handful of poplars about 25 feet high, some small jack pine not over 20 feet, and a scattering of red willow and hazel brush, all of which covered only the main body of the island itself and didn't extend up into the arms of the U. The rest of it was covered by timothy grass and tightly woven weeds and clover, up to waist height where the soil was thickest, down to nothing where the rock was exposed. The shore of the island facing north was a rim of beach about 10 feet wide. The outside or southern edge was made up largely of rocks, curved and rounded by the ageless chewing of small waves pushed by the fall wind before the freeze-up. On the right arm of the U, a flat rock, about 20 feet long, projected out into the water and made a platform or table. This rock was so square it seemed almost sculpted, although it had been broken naturally by the glacier along straight fault lines, and seemed somehow out of place because of its sharp corners and flawless edges. It can only be guessed what had happened on and to the island in the time before. Summer to winter to summer over countless ages, it had been forming and changing. Once there hadn't been a lake, only a swamp and giant beasts that shook the ground when they passed the high point that became the island. Before, all was covered by sea, and fish as large as boats, huge sharks swam, hunting past the rocks that became the island. When the sea was gone, there came the ice, the great sheet of blue-white cold that covered all there was, and everything died, or was made to sleep and wait for thousands of years. And when the ice was gone, it left a huge lake, a freshwater lake as large as many seas. And when that was gone, before man still, before we know of men or before there were men to know of men, the massive lake withdrew and left smaller lakes. And from that time on, it left the island. From the time before, it's only possible to guess, only possible to dream of the battles of the dinosaurs, tearing the earth, and sharks as large as boats, whipping ocean currents with their tails. Only possible to imagine the saber-toothed tigers and mastodons, and the men, who could live with nothing but their minds as tools. From all of that time, the small island in almost the exact center of Sucker Lake, in the northern part of Wisconsin, cannot be known, can only be part of theory and ideas, hopes, wishes, dreams. But in the summer of the middle of his 15th year on Earth, Will Newton discovered the island, or was discovered by the island, he was never sure which. And from that time on, it's not necessary to guess about it any longer, but only necessary to know Will. Chapter 1. Part of our problem is that we run around naming things without asking them if they want to be named. Then, after we name them, they don't know they're named anyway. A tree doesn't know it's a tree. A fish doesn't know it's a fish. And if the fish did know, it would probably be upset by it. Who wants to be called fish? Will Newton. Even at 14, Will Newton towered over his parents. They were short, and somehow the genes had jumped a generation and made him tall, 6 feet 2 inches, and had given him breadth, a strong body with wide shoulders and long legs, and muscled arms with big hands. He was brown-blonde, with brown eyes and some freckles across his nose and cheeks, the kind of freckles parents and aunts who visit once a year just love, but which the owner of those freckles hates. When he was small, one visiting aunt, whose name was honestly Clara, would reach down and pinch his cheeks and say things that were supposed to be cute about the freckles. But when Will grew taller, and taller still, Clara gave it up, because she had to stand on tiptoe to get a good hold on his cheek, and even Clara, in her once-a-year wisdom, knew that it looked silly to be hanging on the cheek of somebody over 6 feet tall. But the freckles were still there, as well as even, white teeth and a fast smile that made tight crinkles at the corners of his eyes. When Clara could no longer grab his freckled cheek, she settled on his teeth and smile. On her yearly visits she would insist, "Smile and show me your teeth. Come on, smile now." The first Thursday after school let out for the summer, Will's father caught both Will and his mother at the same time in the kitchen before they could get away, and he began a conference. He loved to hold conferences, but they tended to be boring in an amiable way, and his wife and son tried to avoid them. This time he sat at the table with a fresh cup of coffee and smiled up at them, beckoned them to sit down, and said, "What would you guys think about moving?" Will said nothing. His mother, who was only slightly thin and had a usually composed face, smiled back nervously and pushed an imaginary hair out of her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean move. You know, like pack up and move." "Is this another of those Alaska things?" she asked. 2 years before, Will's father had gotten sick of his job with the State Highway Department and had come home one day and announced that he had a chance to go to Alaska and work on a road out of Nome, and they should start packing. Will's mother developed a nervous tic in her left eye, which had taken almost a month to disappear. It wasn't as bad as the time a year earlier, when he had come home one afternoon and announced he'd come across a plan to raise foxes and retire at 46. When he started building the cages in the basement and seemed about to order the first fox, Will's mother put her foot down. "Because if it is, Jim—" No, this isn't like that. The truth is, I've been promoted, and they want me to take over a district in the northern part of the state, up by Pinewood. It's a real opportunity, and I've pretty much got to do it. So, how do you guys feel about moving?" Will took quick stock of the situation. They now lived in Madison, a fair-sized city, with things to do, things to see. All of his friends were here. And he was used to the school, knew which teachers were dorks and which weren't, knew what—
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.